cooperation, transparency and accountability. Otherwise, these statements will remain symbolic and not substantive. Thomas.
Do stay with us, Lieutenant Colonel Singh, as we turn over to our next story. And we head over to East Asia. And Hong Kong media tycoon and China critic Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years in prison, marking the conclusion of the city's largest national security case. Lai was convicted on charges of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and publishing seditious materials. Hong Kong leader John Lee has defended the sentence, stating that Lai deserved the punishment due to the harm he had caused. These remarks came a day after the sentence was handed down. Let's listen into some of those remarks.
Jimmy Lai, who has betrayed the country and Hong Kong, has been sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, a heavy punishment that sends a solemn warning against malicious plots of collusion with external elements and endangering national security. He caused damage to the interests of the country and the Hong Kong SAR. His conviction is supported by overwhelming evidence, and he deserves the punishment after all the harm that he has done.
International reactions have been swift. The European Union has called the prosecution politically motivated and urged Hong Kong authorities to restore press freedom. Australia has also expressed grave concerns over the deteriorating situation of press freedom in Hong Kong, while Britain has decried the sentence as tantamount to a life sentence, calling for Lai's release on humanitarian grounds. Lieutenant Colonel Singh joins us once again on this story. Of course, this has been a huge story. Lai, who is a British citizen and the founder of now shut pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison in a system of Hong Kong which is supposed to operate on the one country, two systems rules until 2047. Western governments, of course, seeing this as proof that Hong Kong's promised freedoms are effectively dead, and China, of course, saying that Jimmy Lai's conviction is the rule of law. Do you think Western governments are correct in issuing these statements?
Of course, they are correct, because when Jimmy Lai gets legally prosecuted, he is being politically targeted. So this overlap defines political imprisonment. See, it is very clear the proportionate evidence of violence or direct threat. It's not an ideological disagreement. You know, we see that on paper, yes, China is saying, okay, fine, they're not interfering, but this kind of prosecution definitely shows that they are prosecuting. And it is a final closing book of the Hong Kong's identity as a bridge between East and the West. By, labeling a media mogul as a national security threat, China is prioritizing domestic control over the international reputation. So it has long-term implications. It ends Hong Kong as a global hub, because Hong Kong succeeded because of the rule of law. This sentencing signals that global investors and multinational corporations will accelerate exit to Singapore or Tokyo, fearing that leadership can target them like Jimmy Lai. And if they try to be more expressive and cross that political line. So somewhere I think China is giving a very chilling blueprint to the nations when, it is demonstrating that you can absorb a global financial center and strip its freedom to express. So I think it's a very, very serious concern which the Western democracy is expressing.
Lieutenant Colonel Singh, thank you so much for taking the time in speaking to us here on the programme. We now turn over to the US, and Vice President James David Vance has said that Armenia and the United States have signed an agreement to develop cooperation in the civilian nuclear sector. Vance added that the deal includes $5 billion in initial US exports and an additional $4 billion in fuel supply and maintenance. Let's listen in to what the Vice President had to say.
Very proud to announce that our nations have completed negotiations on a 1-2-3 civil nuclear cooperation agreement. Now, once that is completely stood up, it'll pave the way for American and Armenian companies to strike deals on civil nuclear projects. That means up to $5 billion in initial U.S. exports, plus an additional $4 billion in long-term support through fuel and maintenance contracts. I also was very happy with the Prime Minister just a couple of minutes ago to see some of the new drone technology that we will be selling to Armenia. As President Trump knows very well, the very best way to ensure that you have peace is to establish real deterrence. And the best way to establish real deterrence is with the best military technology in the world, and the United States has that.
Professor Veselin Popovsky joins us now, a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Is this deal a strategic signal to Russia or a limited tactical partnership with Armenia, of course, following that peace deal signed earlier in 2025?
Well, definitely. It's a very good news. By the way, Armenia relied on Russia, and before that was part of the Soviet Union for the last century. So obviously this is a signal that Russia can no longer protect any neighbor, and not only Armenia, it applies to every other neighbor. Nobody in the world, Venezuela felt the same, can be protected by Russia. Russia cannot protect itself anymore. It's a failed state. And obviously it's a good news because United States offer protection to Armenia, and it should do the same for Ukraine, by the way. The same deal I expect Donald Trump, J.D. Vance to offer to Ukraine, to give Ukraine and every Russian neighbor the same support, the same protection. That's the only way forward here. Yes, excellent news. I welcome it.
So you don't think this could cause any counter moves from either Moscow or even Ankara?
Well, from Moscow, not much, because Moscow doesn't have much options. Well, they can talk, they can protest. There will be a statement by Foreign Minister Lavrov, and we hear this every day. And they are useless statements. Nobody pay attention to Lavrov and Moscow anymore. Turkey is more interesting because it's a neighbor, and it's obviously will react to that in the sense of was Turkey informed about this deal? They may raise some concerns, but this could be actually easily dealt with on diplomatic level between Turkey and United States. I don't expect much tension. Ideally, Turkey should have been informed in advance. And if not, it's a mistake by the United States. They have to take into account that neighbors need to know those deals.
And how does this deal Armenia's security calculus vis-a-vis Azerbaijan?
Currently, there is a peace, as we know, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is no tension after they signed the two states last year, after a long year of conflict. It's one of the good news of 2025. By the way, Donald Trump doesn't have much to do with that. That was negotiated bilaterally between the two countries, mostly. Well, they invited Donald Trump as a guest to be present, but the deal was nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was done between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I don't think, again, much tension will arise. Hopefully, the two countries will coexist and cooperate as neighbors from now on. If Azerbaijan needs some help in terms of its security, obviously, it's also another partner. I'm sure United States and other countries will not refuse any support for Azerbaijan, but mostly Armenia is the one that needs. Armenia is a poorer country of the two. Azerbaijan has its own resources. It's a pretty much well-capacitated state to take care of its own security. So in this case, Armenia is the one that needs foreign assistance.
What more can you tell us about Armenia as a country? Its strategic importance, its resource wealth. Why has the US moved like this?
U.S. would like to be involved in peace deals, mostly after the conflict ended. And Armenia needs support because, yes, it's a mountainous country. Its GDP is pretty low per capita. It doesn't have the necessary exploration. It has, you are right, they have resources, but they need more exploration and more international assistance, I will put it generally. And certainly security is important, but also economic infrastructure is there. And that possibly also explain why United States offered that assistance. We know this administration is very materialistic. They are looking for material outcome of that. And one could be that I would not be surprised, let's put it this way, that further deals for Armenian exploration of their resources follows, again, with United States involvement and contribution to that.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, do stay with us as we turn over to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine for our next story. And Russia has claimed strikes on Ukrainian military targets, while Ukraine reported intercepting multiple Russian drones. Russia's defense ministry says that over the past 24 hours, Russian troops had struck a Ukrainian military airfield's infrastructure, along with energy and transportation facilities, as well as temporary deployment points of the Ukrainian army and foreign mercenaries. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has praised the resilience of emergency responders and railway workers as they continue to maintain critical infrastructure despite daily Russian attacks. In his regular video address, Zelensky highlighted the tireless efforts of Ukraine's state emergency service in restoring energy facilities and extinguishing fires. He also acknowledged the continued operation of Ukraine's railways despite ongoing strikes targeting logistics and railway-related facilities. Zelensky called for intensified efforts in February to strengthen Ukraine's position in the war, including improved access to Starlink systems and reliable delivery of military equipment. Let's listen in to what the Ukrainian president has said.
Дякую за реальну ефективність рятувальникам ДСНС України, які щодня працюють на об'єктах енергетики, на гасінні пожеж. Щодня допомагають людям та громадам пройти цей складний час. Результати кожного, хто задіяний зараз в ліквідації наслідків, ударів, у відновленні – це робота на всю Україну, на силу нашої держави, на здатність українців вистояти і цією зимою. Та загалом хочу теж відзначити Укрзалізницю, усіх фахівців Укрзалізниці. Надзвичайно складно. Зараз фактично щодня російські удари по нашій логістиці, по об'єктах, які працюють на залізницю, по рухомому складу. На багатьох напрямках небезпечно, але наша залізниця продовжує працювати.
Professor Popovsky joins us once again. Ukraine says Russia's attacks on critical infrastructure daily keeps even through this. Ukraine's rail routes remain operational. While, of course, counteracting claims from Moscow saying that it's struck these key Ukrainian military targets. What does Ukraine's ability to keep railway networks going say about its wartime resilience?
Well, certainly it's very clear what Ukraine is doing. They are defending its territory, they are defending its infrastructure, they are saving human lives by operating in emergency with those aggressive strikes and inhuman strikes by Russia. I see resilience, I see commitment, and it's every day when President Zelensky says that even reassures all of us that Ukraine will survive the winter. The Russia strategy will fail. Ukraine will not freeze this winter. I speak daily with my friends in Ukraine, and all of them are pretty optimistic. They say the winter will be over in a few weeks. We have private generators for extra electricity. We are not dying. We haven't heard anybody dying from freezing, by the way, over the last 2 months. So everything Russia is trying to do is to cut electricity, cut the heating, but that doesn't lead anywhere. A resilient nation like Ukraine will survive the winter and will defeat Russia long term, obviously. This is the last attempt by Putin to inflict some damage, and it failed again. So it failed not only militarily, but even with the war crimes Putin commits against Ukraine, those don't produce anything. There are no freezing in Ukraine. People survive pretty solidly, and I'm pretty optimistic that in long term Ukraine will defend its territory, will liberate Donbass, and it will take time because of, we know why, because of Donald Trump continuous neutrality here and not helping Ukraine and supporting Putin effectively.
And what about the front line? What more do we know about it? We know about certain major battles currently unfolding, including that of Pokrovsk, a major flashpoint in the war currently. What more can you tell us about what's going on the Eastern Front?
Well, it's a stalemate. There is not much movement either way. Pokrovsk is still in the hands of Ukraine, as it's Kupiansk. So again, I mentioned the total failure of the Russian advance. They tried those two small cities, by the way, they're not big ones. Kupiansk and Pokrovsk are very minimal in comparing to Indian or Chinese cities. They're just with a population of 50,000 and maybe less left now. So Russia doesn't advance, and it advances so minimally that it doesn't make any difference really on the battlefield. Ukraine is defending very well, and Russia is losing a lot of soldiers. So that's the news from the battlefield. In January only, for those 31 days, the estimation is that Russia lost over 30,000. So it's more than 1,000 per day. So is Russia losing, attacking Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, and other small villages. So that's the news of the battlefield. Putin is ready to sacrifice 1,000 soldiers per day.
And if you don't, apologies, and if you don't mind, you're speaking to people in Ukraine now. You're saying they remain optimistic despite, of course, the ongoing winter, despite the war reaching its fourth year. It will be later on this month. What's the mindset of the people there currently?
Well, resilience, commitment. I speak to people in Kharkiv, which is only 40 kilometers from the battlefield. There are drones. They say sometimes, yes, we wake up in the morning and we see the debris from the drones falling down. There are some sirens. They have to evacuate when the situation gets worse, and they do that. They're used to that already. They're kind of joking with me now, and they say, yes, another winter, we can do another 5 winters, no problem. We will survive. We will get over this. It will take time. And they blame, obviously, Donald Trump for not helping Ukraine like Joe Biden did last time. But they are very optimistic. They say, we have our spirit, our government. They're all behind the government. There is absolutely no doubt that they are supportive. 70%, the latest opinion polls show that they support the government, and they are expecting good news in 26.
Professor Popovsky, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us. Great pleasure to talk, as always. We now move on, and the US Labour Board is abandoning a years-long legal battle against Elon Musk's SpaceX, according to a Bloomberg News report. The National Labour Relations Board has dismissed a complaint accusing the aerospace company of firing 8 engineers over the involvement in a letter criticising Musk. In a letter to the former employee's attorney, the NLRB said it lacks jurisdiction over SpaceX, citing a recent opinion from the National Mediation Board, which oversees airline and railroad workers. As a result, the agency said it will not pursue the case. The move follows a US appeals court ruling that questioned the NLRB's legal structure and barred it from proceeding against SpaceX. The decision could limit future labour actions involving the company. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of colluding with foreign forces and publishing seditious material. The victim ends Hong Kong's largest national security case and fuels global concern over Beijing's curbs on the city's freedoms. Following this, China says the 20-year sentence for Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai is legitimate and lawful, insisting the case upholds the rule of law. The EU and press freedom groups condemn the ruling, calling for Lai's immediate release. The Prince and Princess of Wales say they are deeply concerned by newly released documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Kensington Palace says their focus remains on the victims as renewed scrutiny falls on figures tied to the late financier. Russian drones and missiles strike cities across Ukraine, killing at least 4 people, according to regional officials. Ukraine says it shoots down over 100 drones amid ongoing war and parallel diplomatic talks. Human Rights Watch says an apparent Nigerian military drone strike kills at least 17 civilians in western Niger. The group says at least 13 others are injured when the strike hits a crowded market near the Burkina Faso border. Thousands protest across Australia as Israeli President Isaac Herzog arrives on a multi-city visit. The trip follows a deadly Hanukkah shooting in Sydney and comes after an invitation from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Lebanon says 14 people are killed after residential buildings collapse in Tripoli as search and rescue operations end. Civil defense officials say 8 people are rescued from the rubble in the Bab al-Tabane neighborhood. Venezuelan authorities say they seek court approval to place opposition figure Juan Pablo Guanipa under house arrest after he is seized in Caracas. The move comes after his release from jail following 8 months in detention over alleged terrorism plot charges. We turn to Japan to start this hour, and the Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi expressed openness to dialogue with China following a period of heightened tensions. In a statement, she emphasized Japan's willingness to continue discussions with Beijing, citing ongoing exchanges of views between the two nations. Takaichi, who recently secured a resounding election victory, assured that Japan would handle its relations with China in a calm and appropriate manner, signaling a desire to ease the tensions that had arisen in November after the remarks on Taiwan. Despite the diplomatic friction, Takaichi's position remains firm on fostering a constructive relationship moving forward. To discuss this ongoing situation in Japan is Major General Gigi Davidi, a professor of international relations and strategic studies. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for taking the time. A resounding victory for Sanai Takaichi today. There are, of course, huge questions over how the Beijing issue will be tackled. Of course, she's seen as a major China hawk, much like the person who she is a protege of, Shinzo Abe. Now Takaichi has a resounding majority in Japanese parliament. How is she expected to handle that friction with Beijing going forward?
Well, Thomas, I think Prime Minister Takaichi's gamble of going for snap polls, barely 3 months into office, has paid off, and she has got absolute majority with 316 seats out of 465. and with an ally, that is the Innovation Party, which has 36 seats. So she has a very resounding majority, and that gives her space for maneuver to pursue her agenda. Now, her challenges are basically, one is to handle relationship with China, and rightly so. When she was in the office, one of the statement that in case Taiwan's security threatened, then Japanese willingly will get involved. Or in other words, that Japanese security is definitely tied to the security of Taiwan. And that's right, because if you take the Western Pacific and you take the East Asia, well, Taiwan is a hinge in this whole geographic region. And in case Taiwan is threatened or there is a conflict with Thailand, with Taiwan, then willy-nilly, it will have impact on the not only Korean Peninsula but also Japan per se. But the point is that she has to handle these relations because tension with China is not in the interest of Japan, because we all know that after all, China is the biggest trading partner of Japan. And concurrently, the challenge of Takaichi is also the economy of Japan, because that is another challenge. So they both are interlinked. In case the tension with China is managed, then obviously she can focus on the economy, which is a second challenge. But point here is two issues are very important. First and foremost, there is defense pact with America, and America has certain degree of strategic ambiguity as far as Taiwan is concerned. So therefore, Taiwan issue is linked with the American and Japanese security. So that cannot be wished away. And the second point is how the tension is managed. That is a major challenge, because China is very, very aggressive and very sensitive to the Taiwan issue. And any indication that either Japan or America are trying to sort of kind of interference in the Taiwanese affair will be taken on very sternly with the communist leadership in China. So therefore, I think Prime Minister Takaichi will have to do very tightrope walking to ensure that they do not actually annoy or rub the Chinese on the wrong side. At the same time, they are able to also look after the security interest. Thomas.
Yes, General Davidi, do stay with us as we turn over to our next story. We head to Europe, and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov expressed pessimism about the future of economic relations with the US. Despite Russia's openness to cooperation, Lavrov dismissed the potential for fruitful economic ties, citing Washington's pursuit of economic dominance. In an interview, Lavrov noted that the US government's policy, including its opposition to the BRICS bloc, hinder the prospects for improved relations. While Russian officials, including envoy Kirill Dmitriev, have hinted at the possibility of economic revival following a Ukraine peace agreement, Lavrov remains cautious. He added that the US was creating artificial obstacles to Russia's integration with BRICS nations. General Davidi joins us once again to discuss US-Russia relations. The big picture here, of course, is that things are still cold, but with warm spots, especially with this new US administration. Of course, we have military communication beginning again with direct talks between the United States and Russia, something that was non-existent under previous presidential administrations. However, we are seeing a situation where nuclear arms control has collapsed. And of course, the main issue being those sanctions and the Russia-Ukraine war. Do you think Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is correct here in citing that there is not much hope for the development of United States and Russian economic cooperation, given Donald Trump's stance on Moscow?
Thomas, that's right, because if you take the bigger picture, despite the fact that President Trump has gone out of the way to invite President Putin on one-on-one meeting in Alaska last year, and he has taken definite steps, but actually things are not working on the ground. There are two, three very important reasons. First and foremost, any peaceful peace initiative on Ukraine has not yielded results, and the war, when President Trump came to power second time, he said that he will stop the war within 24 hours. Now it is more than a year that President Trump has been in office, and there's no movement whatsoever on the peace agreement. Second, of course, are the policies of America, because one is, you can see how America has come very heavily on the Russian export oil, to the extent they have been also impounding the tankers, and they have also laid very heavy tariffs on all those countries which are buying Russian oil. And secondly, of course, President Trump is very vehemently opposed to the BRICS bloc per se, and it terms BRICS as an adversary or as an challenge to the American economy or the American policies per se. So therefore, when you put this thing together, no likelihood of peace on Ukraine in any near future, America's heavy-handedness and very vehement approach to the Russian oil exports, and of course to the BRICS group per se, all these things put together, I think Lavrov is right, that there's no likelihood of any major change in the economic outlook between America and Russia. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now turn over to the British Isles, and Jeffrey Epstein scandal continues there, and it haunts the British royal family. The latest release of the files has again heightened the relationship between the King's brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and the convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. While most royal figures have stayed silent, Prince William and Kate have issued their first public statement expressing deep concern over the ongoing revelations and focusing their thoughts on the victims. Prince Edward also commented, emphasising the importance of remembering the victims as well. Meanwhile, King Charles, who removed Andrew's titles last year, has yet to publicly address the scandal. And Princesses Beatrice and Eugene, Andrew's children, have not yet commented despite their connection to Epstein in the files. This comes as, of course, in terms and for the British royal family, the Andrew problem just won't go away. We have seen the former prince being mentioned in the Epstein files hundreds of times, along with those controversial images that came out of the former prince crouched over that redacted woman, whose photos went viral. Andrew has been the stain in terms of the staple British controversy when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew, formerly prince, had his titles stripped last year, maintained contact with Epstein after his 2008 conviction. That has been proven with these files. And of course, he faces now two accusers, one being the late Virginia Giuffre, who took her own life last year and publicly accused Andrew of sexual contact with her when she was underage. It hasn't been quiet for the royal family in this scandal, particularly coming to Andrew, following that catastrophic BBC Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis in 2019 that destroyed his credibility. Much of the British and world public seemed to see through this, and Andrew has been scarce in public ever since. Joining us now is Gautam Mukherjee. He's a senior journalist. He joins us live from New Delhi. Gautam, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the Epstein files continues to shake world politics, and the United Kingdom, of course, no exception, and the royal family no exception either. Now we've seen these comments made by the Dutch and Duchess of Cambridge. What does that mean for the scandal? Do you think that the British royal family are doing a good job of taking responsibility, especially for William and Kate's uncle and his connections to the late financier?
It looks to me as if they are reluctant to do very much, and that is, quite sad because Andrew does not look repentant, and nor does the royal family look like it's punishing him. So, the reports about, he'll have to open his door personally for the first time in his life because he's only going to be left with 3 royal servants in Norfolk. Now, this kind of thing is a little pathetic considering the rest of us, the common folk, have to take responsibility for their actions and are punished for them in case they are out of order, to the extent, particularly to the extent that Andrew is implicated in. So I don't know what they're up to. They're trying to get out of it by doing things in small degree in the hope that the public will accept it.
And of course, someone whose statement is absent as far as now is his brother, King Charles. He took away his titles last year. He's no longer a prince. He's had all his military honours stripped from him as well. What do you think the lack of statement from King Charles says about the way that the royal family is navigating things?
Well, I think they're trying to evade responsibility, and they're trying to prevent any real harm coming to Andrew either. He's not being punished at all. And King Charles is hoping that he will be absolved of criticism by doing what he has done, which is really rather cosmetic in nature. It's not enough. It's not enough. It does not seem like it's enough at all.
Gautam Mukherjee, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you. We now move on and over to some breaking news coming out of the Middle East next. And Israeli authorities have informed the United States that they are prepared to carry out unilateral strikes on Iran if necessary. According to local Israeli media, Israeli Defense Ministry representatives shared this message with Pentagon officials last week. Israel has outlined its plans to strike Iran independently if Tehran crosses its red line on ballistic missiles. While Israel does not currently see immediate threats, it continues to monitor the situation closely. Officials also expressed concerns that any potential US action against Iran may be limited, which contradicts Israel's stance. Meanwhile, a new round of negotiations between Iran and the US took place in Muscat, Oman, focusing on Tehran's nuclear program. Saul Sadka joins us now. He's a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Saul, thank you very much for joining us. The Trump administration has been outspoken when it comes to seeing diplomacy first, negotiating with Iran, with, of course, that military threat still there, loaded up in the Persian Gulf. If Israel does interfere here, will it throw all that diplomatic progress that the United States has already said it favors out the window?
Well, we saw the same thing a few times already over the past year and a half, and we have to make a very strong distinction between what is being said and what is being done. And for example, so we read this report, and we don't know, is this the real facts, or has this been leaked specifically to give certain people a message that they might be able to put a piece of paper between the Americans and the Israelis, or perhaps they could play them off against each other. Most likely, this is all messaging. We've seen in the past is that when Israel attacked Iran, even though the USA pretended not to know about it, it was quite clear that they did. And the same thing happened, by the way, with Qatar. The evidence that the Americans were informed of the Israelis' intent to attack Hamas leaders in Qatar is almost incontrovertible. So I would take this with a grain of salt. The Israelis and the Americans are and have been in the past working together to play essentially diplomatic divide and rule games against various parts of the Iranian regime. And that's probably what's happening here again. Although Israel, of course, as we saw in June, certainly does have the ability pretty much do whatever it wants to the Iranians. Once the Iranians no longer have any air defense or any proxy deterrence from Hezbollah or Hamas, the Israelis are basically free to have their way with whatever they want to do in Iran.
The Israelis, of course, have not been silent about their wishes for the Americans to take direct military action in Iran. Of course, the Trump administration has been reluctant. What will this do to the Israeli-United States relationship if Israel is seen undermining those diplomatic efforts by the United States to negotiate its ballistic missiles, its nuclear program, and its support for regional proxies when it comes to negotiations to them? Do you think that Donald Trump will react well to a direct Israeli military action?
Well, like I said, my assumption is, and the evidence for this, that this is already a game, that the Americans and the Israelis, as they have been before, are completely in cahoots. And the messaging that's coming out from Israel and from America is all coordinated to present Iran with an impossible situation. Like, all its decisions at this point are bad ones. It has to make a very bad choice, and it has no way around it. So the Americans are giving the impression they might be willing to negotiate, and as they're willing to negotiate, they're building up an ever vaster array of defensive and offensive capabilities all around Iran.
Apologies for the interruption. Any idea what these red lines could be? When it turns Israel saying that it's outlined its plans to strike Iran independently if Tehran crosses its red line. What is that?
Well, that hasn't been publicly announced. I read through the reports, and it's not clear exactly what that is. My guess it might be something to do with the re-establishment of production lines that were destroyed by Israel in June, or perhaps it will be the development of more complex and advanced missiles that would be able to better evade the current state-of-the-art defensive apparatus that the Israelis and the Americans have. It could be something like that. Or it could simply be a number. It could be that the Israelis are making assumptions that the Iranians have, say, 1,000 missiles capable of reaching their territory. And they're quite happy with that situation because they know they can bat most of them away. But say they would be more reluctant if they knew the Iranians were trying to build 2,000 more. Or perhaps they are simply worried about the number of launchers, because if you recall, the main issue with these missiles is not how many they have in total, but how many they can fire off at once. Because the only real threat from non-nuclear ballistic missiles is the question of can they be fired off at such a rate as to overwhelm the defensives.
Okay,
and
so
currently we don't have enough launchers to do that.
Okay, so do stay with us as we turn over to a related development. We head over to Gaza, and Israel's defense forces has said that it has killed 4 suspected, what it calls militants, who claimed to attack its troops as the armed men emerged from a tunnel in southern Gaza, and calling the group's actions as blatant violations of the ceasefire. This comes after a US brokered truce entering its second phase last month, as the violence has continued in the Gaza Strip, with Israel and Hamas accusing each other of breaching the agreement. The IDF has also said that 4 armed terrorists exited an underground tunnel shaft and fired towards soldiers in the Rafah area in the southern Gaza Strip. Following identification, the troops eliminated the terrorists. Saul Saka joins us once again. 4 more individuals killed in Gaza. What's the current grasp that Hamas still has on the enclave? This occurred near Rafah, of course, where that crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip has opened. What do you have to say about this recent escalation in violence? Of course, we've seen over 500 Palestinians killed post-ceasefire. So what more can you tell us about this particular incident?
Well, the details of the incident are unclear, but it just adds to a long line of similar incidents that have been happening since the ceasefire came into effect some 6 months ago. And I have no doubt that they will continue to happen because there is a certain portion of the Hamas authorities who don't like the ceasefire and would like to continue to fight. And they view that as a religious imperative. So nothing will overcome that religious imperative completely. And so the IDF will continue to have to sit around the Hamas-controlled portions of Gaza and gradually denude their abilities to attack. And that will continue to cost the lives of these Hamas terrorists and also occasionally IDF soldiers. But that is the world we live in. You have to constantly hold the line. And hopefully over a period of years, Hamas, as they run out of weapons, will gradually disappear.
Okay, Sol Sadka, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you on these issues. We turn now to Southeast Asia, and the Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul's Bam Jai Thai party won a clear victory in Thailand's general election, raising the prospect that a more stable coalition may now succeed in bringing an end to a period of prolonged political instability. Anutin set the stage for the snap election in mid-December during a border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, a move political analysts said appeared to be timed by the conservative leader to cash in on surging nationalism. With nearly 95% of polling stations reporting preliminary results released by the Election Commission showed the Bum Jai Thai party winning about 192 seats compared to 117 for the Progressive People's Party and 74 for the once dominant Pheu Thai party. Let's listen in to what the Thai residents had to say.
ก็ผมก็กะแล้วว่าเสียหนูมาเพราะว่าอย่างพูดถึงพรรคเพื่อไทยพรรคประชาชนผมไม่พูดถึงนะเอาแค่นี้ยังเด็กเกินไปเด็กมากเห็นหนีไปแล้วตกต่ำเขาก่อนผมเป็นคนเสื้อแดงนะผมนิยมทักษิณนะ30 บาทเนี่ยผมนิยมมากเลยปัจจุบันนี้ผมก็ยังใช้30 บาทอยู่รักษาทุกโรคเนี่ยมันตอนแล้วทำไมแกหนีเพื่ออะไรแกหนีไปแล้วทำไมแกไม่ยอมมารับโทษจบไปแล้วถ้าแกมานี่เอาลูกเอาหลานเอาทั้งตระกูลมาเป็นผมไม่เห็นเลือกผมไม่เลือกเดี๋ยวนี้ผมไม่เลือก
พี่ว่ายุ่งกับมาตรา112มากกว่าใช่ค่ะจะรุนแรงไปหน่อยเพราะเราก็คนไทยเหมือนกันเนาะไม่ว่าคุณจะอายุมากอายุน้อยแต่คือเราเกิดประเทศไทยค่ะเราควรจะรักบ้านเราแต่คุณมาคิดแบบแบ่งแยกกันมันไม่ใช่
We finish this hour with news from the tech world, and the European Commission has ordered Meta to allow rival AI chatbots on WhatsApp after finding the company violated EU competition rules. Meta's own chatbot currently has an advantage with a dedicated button in the app. While it allows customer service bots to use WhatsApp through the business API, it doesn't allow general purpose AI like ChatGPT to access the platform. Authorities say WhatsApp must be open for fair competition, expecting it to change possibly with a system similar to the system once used on Windows. Meta may need to allow third-party chatbots to initiate conversation or use shortcuts. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates. Thank you.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for...
Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ghislaine Maxwell refused to answer the US House Oversight Committee, invoking the Fifth Amendment. Lawmakers say both parties criticised the move, as Democrats allege she seeks clemency and her lawyer says she'll testify only with a pardon. King Charles III says he will support police if asked over claims Prince Andrew shared sensitive material with Jeffrey Epstein. Buckingham Palace says the King is concerned by newly reviewed Epstein files. The United States and Armenia have agreed to cooperate on civil nuclear energy, deepening ties. The move follows a US-brokered South Caucasus peace deal, with Washington seeking to draw Yerevan closer. The United States has issued new guidelines urging US-flagged ships to avoid Iran's waters in the Strait of Hormuz, aimed at raising tensions. The advisory also warns against Iranian forces boarding American vessels. The White House opposes Israel annexing the West Bank, saying stability is vital to regional security. It stopped short of condemning new measures or saying if concerns were raised with Israel's government. Venezuela's parliament has delayed a vote on a proposed amnesty law, moving the session to Thursday. The move comes amid US pressure to free political prisoners following Maduro ouster. Police arrested 27 people as clashes erupted while officers cleared protests against Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit in Sydney. Protesters allege pepper spray misuse as PM Anthony Albanese urged calm ahead of the new rally. Mexican authorities recovered 10 bodies during the search for workers kidnapped from a Canadian-owned mine in Sonora State. Officials say 5 victims are identified so far, while forensic teams work to confirm the others. And for your top story this hour, Britain's Prince William is meeting Saudi Arabia's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, kicking off a visit aimed at deepening economic cooperation, but overshadowed by his disgraced uncle Andrew's links to Jeffrey Epstein. It is William's first official trip to Saudi Arabia, and ahead of his arrival in Riyadh, Kensington Palace broke years of silence over Andrew's links to the late US convicted sex offender by saying William and his wife Catherine were deeply concerned by the continuing revelations. The short statement, which did not directly reference the ex-Prince Andrew, came as the monarchy faces renewed pressure over allegations stemming from the tarnished royal ties to Epstein. We are now being joined by Ambassador Suresh Goel, who's a former Indian diplomat, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How does the timing of Prince William's visit come amid renewed focus on the Epstein files affect its diplomatic impact?
Very difficult to say, really. I will just, because the fact is that Epstein scandal has actually pervaded practically the whole global international politics, with the kind of connections he made and the kind of inroads through whatever kind of network he had developed. It had actually crossed many countries and lots of top political leadership as well as constitutional leadership. Prince Andrew's case is very well known. It has been already agreed to. And the damage of what Prince Andrew is actually now also affecting the government in the UK, with Lord Mendelssohn's appointment as ambassador to Washington. Therefore, I'm sure Prince William's on the visit, he may have to answer, but more than likely, and this is just my hunch really, Saudi Arabia will not be talking about the issues in a kind of a sense of to impact on the relationship between the two countries, which is what basically Prince Williams will be doing as a constitutional authority belonging to the monarch's family. But they may just talk about the Epstein in a very informal manner across the table as a kind of a conversation without making it part of the formal agenda. And therefore, while Prince Williams will talk about it, will explain the kind of role that Prince had played and how it impacted on King Charles now, I don't think that it is really going to weigh so heavily in the minds of the two princes when they talk to each other.
And what strategic interests lie behind deepening UK-Saudi relations today beyond ceremonial symbolism?
I think a lot, really, because Saudi Arabia, with the role it is playing in the Middle East, and also in terms of the European security architecture, please do, if you recall that several meetings between the Ukraine and Russian Federation have taken place in Oman as a part in the Gulf area, and Saudi Arabia has very good connections with Oman. Saudi Arabia would be very interested in what is impacting the European security, and also in terms of what is happening in the Middle East. They are very Saudi Arabia and UAE conflict has grown actually even within Yemen, Houthis. So Saudi Arabia will have a deep interest in seeing what UK is thinking about the developments, both in terms of Ukraine and Europe, and also in terms of the whole global politics, the impact of Trump's tariff policies, impact of what Trump decisions are. Therefore, Saudi Arabia and UK will be talking about those global politics and impact on the energy security.
And people are saying this visit is shadowed by the Epstein files. Do you think the shadow of it can highlight broader challenges in separating personal reputations from state-level engagements?
My sense is that they will not allow the shadow of Epstein scandal to impact on the bilateral relations. It will be a passing shadow, there will be a conversation piece, etc., etc. but it will not be serious part of agenda, because the relationship between Saudi Arabia and UK, given the present context of the European security and the energy security, will be far, far too important than to be affected by this.
And is the focus on the scandal distracting from substantive issues like security, trade, or regional cooperation that the visit aims to address?
No, I again say that I don't think it will seriously impact on the defense, the security relationship between the two countries. No.
And what are we expecting to see after this visit concludes?
That is something which is difficult to answer. I think this visit is going to lay the groundwork for further conversations. I don't expect that there will be immediate results, but it is preparing the background for further developments in terms of the bilateral relationship.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Suresh, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Political parties in Venezuela have called for the immediate release of opposition leader Juan Pablo Guaidó after he was rearrested just hours after being freed from prison on Sunday. Supporters say that his detention undermines recent political prisoner releases. Let's listen in.
No es posible que ellos hayan emitido una boleta de excarcelación que solamente decía 2 condiciones, pero ellos hoy están alegando otras cosas. Una vez más queda en evidencia que el régimen no tiene una voluntad política realmente de avanzar y de que logremos una democracia plena y lograr una libertad absoluta de todos los presos políticos, que hay que dejar claro que no han cometido ningún delito, solamente pensar.
Meanwhile, relatives and activists have expressed deep disappointment after talks in the National Venezuelan Assembly to approve further amnesty for political prisoners were postponed. The delay has dashed hopes that hundreds more could be freed, leaving families frustrated and mistrustful of official promises. Let's listen in to some of their reactions.
Y hoy enterarme que la pospusieron, la suspendieron, no sé, ya me siento muy mal. Es una burla para los sentimientos de las personas que estamos acá, los familiares, la espera tan larga. Me siento muy decepcionada, la verdad.
Todo el mundo habla de la ley de amnistía y ayer hubo excarcelaciones sin que la ley esté aprobada. Es decir, que no hace falta la ley para hacer excarcelaciones de gente inocente.
Moreover, in a related development, freed political prisoners marched in protest shortly after their release in Caracas, calling for the complete and unconditional liberation of all detained opposition figures. Let's listen in to one such human rights activist who had been detained since his arrest in December 2024.
Creo que tengo una expectativa muy alta de cómo los venezolanos han perdido el miedo y cómo lo van a seguir perdiendo, porque ahorita necesitamos más que nunca desobedecer a quienes están en el poder, necesitamos más que nunca organizarnos y avanzar para poder arrancarles el poder y tener una elección general que nos lleve a tener autoridades que genuinamente representen la soberanía popular.
We are now being joined by Ambassador Vishwanathan, who's a former ambassador to Venezuela. Thank you so much for joining us here today. What does the rearrest of the opposition leader shortly after his release say about the government's commitment to political reform and reconciliation?
The Venezuelan government would do this release and manage the transition process gradually with full control. Okay, they wouldn't like suddenly to open up everything and have a serious problem of serious protests and agitations at the moment. You remember even what Trump says. He says first stabilization, then recovery, and then only transition. So they're also following the same path as Trump says.
And how might the postponement of the amnesty talks affect trust between Venezuela's ruling authorities and the opposition? as well as public confidence in the possibility of genuine change?
Of course, there is absolutely no trust between the opposition and the government. The opposition believes in Trump, and they don't give space for the government and accommodate them and compromise with them and reach a mutually agreeable settlement. They are using Trump to show his guns at their head and try and get concessions. This is not a viable or sustainable formula for transition or to democracy. Eventually, the opposition and the government have to work together and do a deal directly between themselves. It is wrong on the part of the opposition to use Trump at every opportunity to bully and intimidate the government. And the government would, of course, react and manage in a way to control this.
What prompted the rearrest of Juan Pablo, and how does this affect the opposition strategy moving forward?
Apparently, he had violated the conditions of release by making some public statement or something which the government did not like. Anyway, this kind of thing, push and pull, will go on. And it's not going to open up suddenly and become a free and open society tomorrow. No, it will take another at least 3 years.
And can the growing protests in Venezuela bring about any change in the government's stance on opposition leaders and political freedom?
No, absolutely no. Opposition had been protesting for over a decade. The regime is very well entrenched and strong, and a lot of people have emigrated, and the other people, they have fear, so they have used up all their energy in so many protests in the past. And then the opposition had been misleading the people, saying that, the regime would go tomorrow. It has happened. So people are also tired and exhausted. So I don't think there would be any serious and dangerous protest to overthrow the regime internally or bring about a change. No, it's not going to happen.
And how effective can the proposed amnesty law be in addressing political grievances if opposition parties remain sceptical and key leaders are still targeted?
The Venezuelans are learning from Trump. You see what Trump does? Can anyone negotiate with him? Does anyone have trust with him? And he's still getting away with it. So they think that if he can get away with it in the open, large democracy in the United States, it's a piece of cake for them to do that.
And in a broader human rights context, how should international actors respond to mixed signals of prisoner releases and subsequent arrests when evaluating Venezuela's political trajectory?
The international community should advise the opposition leaders that it is an internal domestic issue. They have to sort it out with the regime instead of going to United States. That's what happened in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, where they had much more brutal dictatorships. They didn't go to America. In fact, America was supporting those dictatorships. So the people, they struggled, and then finally they negotiated and got a deal, and they gave amnesty to them. So in this case, the opposition, they are not talking about amnesty and a deal for the rulers, because they are the American government has announced bounties, like the vice president has bounty of $25 million, and the chief of armed forces has $15 million. Still over $100 million of bounties are on the heads of these people. So why don't this opposition go to Americans and say that please remove these bounties and stop the sanction? Then we will deal with this government and we will negotiate with them directly. That is the only way.
Thank you. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly.
Okay.
Havana streets are eerily quiet as emergency measures kicked in to conserve Cuba's fast dwindling fuel stocks under economic pressure from US President Donald Trump. The oil supply in a US stranglehold as the communist government has shuttered universities, reduced school hours and the work week, and slashed public transport as it limited fuel sales. Meanwhile, some locals have reacted. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
Las medidas, te podría decir sin palabras porque no nos remedian el problema. Quizás a algunos les resuelvan, pero no nos remedia el problema a el % mayor de los cubanos que tenemos que hacer trámites, que tenemos inclusive que ir a trabajar.
No puedo ahora mismo moverme. Tengo familia en la provincia, tengo viaje que hacer, todo está cancelado, no hay a dónde, no hay nada. Estás paralizado aquí. Y es más la impotencia por el qué va a pasar, la incertidumbre, que no la...
Las medidas lo que me generan es inseguridad respecto a qué va a pasar con mi semestre universitario, cómo va a ser la situación de evaluaciones semipresencialidad mediante la plataforma EBEA, va a funcionar de verdad. En muchos estudiantes que viven en pueblos un poco recógnitos que nunca tienen corriente, y si no tienen corriente no tienen conexión.
We are now being joined again by Ambassador Vishwanathan. Thank you for joining us back here on NewsX World. How much of Cuba's fuel crisis is due to US pressure, and how much is due to Cuba's own economic problems?
Well, primarily it is the responsibility of the United States, which had imposed sanctions for the last 7 decades. And they had so many assassination attempts and conspiracies and invasions and dirty tricks by CIA. Cuba has survived all these. But now they have reached a stage where it's going to be very, very extremely difficult for them to survive the latest strangulation, because United States has found that the economic warfare could be deadlier than bombing the country or hitting with missiles. Now they have blockaded Cuba, and they do not allow oil supplies to Cuba, and they have threatened sanctions on anyone supplying directly or indirectly. Earlier, Venezuela was supplying, not only supplying oil, but they were giving it free and at subsidized rates. Mexico was supplying some at, again, subsidized rates. But now Mexico has halted its supply. There was a little bit from Russia and a little from Algeria, but insignificant. But in any case, those countries wouldn't like to risk US sanctions by supplying anything. So now Cuba is in a desperate situation. Their stocks will not last for more than 2 weeks. And their own production of oil is only about 40,000 barrels per day. But they need 70,000 barrels more. And so the economy is going to collapse, and it's going to be a serious, serious problem.
And we heard that the government have put on emergency measures of reducing the work week, reducing school hours, shutting universities. Are these measures helping people, or are they making daily life harder?
Of course, it's making daily life harder, and it's going to be much more hard in the coming days and weeks.
And do US sanctions hurt the Cuban government, or mainly ordinary citizens?
It hurts the citizens, it hurts the government, it hurts the country, and it hurts the sentiments of the world, because the US sanctions are absolutely illegal. If they don't like Cuba, they can stop trading with them. Why do they make the whole world to stop business with Cuba? What authority? It is absolutely illegal, immoral, unethical.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Palestinian officials have condemned Israel's recent approval of measures that would deepen its control over the West Bank, including the expansion of settlements and transferring authority for building permits to Israeli authorities in Palestinian areas such as Hebron. Hebron Deputy Mayor Asma al-Sharbati warns that this move could marginalise Palestinian institutions in the West Bank and accelerate settlement expansions. Meanwhile, the governor of Hebron, Khaled Dudin, called for an international action, urging UNESCO to uphold its role in protecting Palestinian heritage, particularly the Ibrahim Mosque, which is registered as a World Heritage Site. Let's listen in to what the governor had to say.
لذلك مطلوب تحرك دولي، مطلوب منظمة اليونسكو التي سجلت الحرم الإبراهيمي والبلدة القديمة على لائحة التراث العالمي بأنها فلسطينية خالصة، أن يقوموا بدورهم. موقف العالم اليوم موقف خجول من إطلاق مصطلح إرهاب على المستوطنين الذين يقومون بكل الموبقات على أبناء شعبنا في كافة أنحاء الوطن.
Alphabet's self-driving unit Waymo says it has gone fully autonomous in Nashville, Tennessee, marking a major expansion as the robot taxi race intensifies in the United States. The move follows a September announcement by Waymo and Lyft to offer deliverless cab rides in the city, making Nashville the first commercial deployment of Waymo vehicles on Lyft's network. Waymo remains the leader in the US autonomous vehicle market, with more than 2,500 driverless cars operating across cities including San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Austin, and Atlanta. Competition is growing, with Tesla making robot taxis a core priority as it shifts focus from electric vehicles. Last week, Waymo raised $16 billion in funding, valuing the company at $126 billion, highlighting strong investor confidence in autonomous technology. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. Iran says it is prepared to dilute highly enriched uranium if the United States lifts all sanctions, according to its atomic energy chief. The statement comes as talks with Washington resume, with no clarity on which sanctions would be removed. Downing Street says Prime Minister Keir Starmer will not resign and is focused on governing despite intense pressure over the Epstein scandal. The statement comes hours after his Chief of Staff and Communications Director quit over controversy. Media tycoon Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison after being convicted of colluding with foreign forces and publishing seditious material. The verdict ends Hong Kong's largest national security case and fuels global concern over Beijing's curbs on the city's freedoms. China says the sentence for Jimmy Lai is legitimate and lawful, insisting the case upholds the rule of law. The European Union, the United Nations and press freedom groups condemn the ruling, calling for Lai's immediate release and warning it undermines press freedom in Hong Kong. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, calls on Iranians to show resolve ahead of the anniversary of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. He says national strength lies in the will of the people, urging unity against foreign pressure. The Prince and Princess of Wales say they are deeply concerned by newly released documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Kensington Palace says their focus remains on the victims as renewed scrutiny falls on figures tied to the late financier. Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi says the country will steadfastly protect its territorial waters and airspace. Speaking after a landslide election win, she pledges to strengthen defences and stresses self-reliance in national security. The European Union condemns Israeli decisions to tighten control of the West Bank and pave the way for more settlements. EU officials say the measures are a step in the wrong direction and undermine the prospects for peace. Those are the headlines for the hour. We head to our top story, and in the 3.5 million pages of the newly released documents in the Epstein files, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been mentioned over 1,000 times. According to reports, the revelation by the US Department of Justice added momentum to the allegation that the late sex offender was a Russian spy. The documents showed multiple times that Epstein desperately wanted to meet Putin, and there were multiple occasions when Epstein expressed his desire to meet the Russian Supremo. However, there's no evidence that the two ever met. However, the Kremlin dismissed the claims of the late American sex offender being a Russian spy, and in a press conference, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, when asked about whether Epstein was a Russian agent, dismissed the claims, calling it a joke and a waste of time. Alison Mutler joins us now. She's a former Associated Press bureau chief. She joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you so much, Alison, for joining us. What this story does show is Jeffrey Epstein's intentions to connect and be influential in all spheres of the world. Of course, Moscow, far away from those mentioned directly in association with Epstein. But what does that say about the power, about the influence that the will of Epstein can be taken seriously, that he did want to meet the Russian president, and that it could in some way maybe have been made possible?
Well, I think without any shadow of a doubt that Jeffrey Epstein did want to meet Putin and made multiple efforts. From the material I read from the files, he tried all kinds of avenues through the former Israeli Prime Minister Barak, through Norwegian contacts. He tried to get to Putin through his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. So he did try repeatedly over the years, because Putin is incredibly powerful and has been at the forefront of international politics for many years. There's no clear evidence has emerged that Epstein and Putin did meet, but that doesn't mean that Epstein did not meet people in his inner circle. The other day I published a story which came from an independent Russian outlet that said that Epstein got a visa to visit Russia, or tried to, through veteran members of the FSB. Now, for your viewers, the FSB is like the successor to the KGB. So Epstein did have links. Whether he met Putin or not, that is unclear. But that doesn't mean that he didn't meet people or officials who were very high up in the Kremlin. But what Epstein wanted was to gain access to someone with massive power, and also with somebody who was very used to influence operations, blackmail, and that kind of wheeling dealing, which the Soviet Union was based on, and that was carried on into modern-day Russia.
Exactly, and of course Epstein remains a floating symbol of elite political corruption. Every